Welcome back to the Civilnet podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Elliott. I'm delighted to be joined today by Manu Pubby, directly from India. He's the senior editor of the Economic Times, which is the largest paper in India, and he's a specialist in defense and security policy. So, Manu, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, and hi to everyone out there.
So, I actually want to start by talking about Armenia and India defense relations. It's something that kind of came out of left field a little bit, right? Is that, we got this announcement that we're purchasing the Swati radar systems, and then it just kind of exploded. But it feels kind of the same way that we feel about the Greeks and the Cypriots, right? Where it's not this it doesn't feel like a convenience thing. There's genuine like and appreciation for each other. And I'll give you one of my favorite moments you had during the Karabakh War. Indian students here in Armenia were lining up and preparing supplies to send to the front lines for our young men. We know that one of the best Indian restaurants here, India Mehak, the owner, was preparing free meals the whole time for our soldiers. So we saw, the Indian community really get woven into the fabric of Armenian society. It was the first time that we started to really feel like a community, which is very interesting. So can you unpack a little bit these relations? Why does it make sense, especially given that Baku is a more obvious partner? They've had direct flights with India for a long time. They're a larger trading partner than we are. It's a larger tourism destination for Indians. Walk us through this.
There are many factors to this. The first thing is India-Armenia go back a long time. We've had Armenian traders there. India has always been a very inclusive country. We've had people from different areas and different regions coming in. So the ancient idea of Armenia and India is very positive. It's always been positive. If you want to come to the current context, India as a country has seen what happens when people get displaced, when, brute force is used to make people leave their lands. Like, I can give you the example of my own family. When the Britishers were there, my family was living in what is now called Pakistan. And the whole area got divided. We were forced out, uprooted from that area. Same things we've seen in Kashmir. We've seen, in the 90s, the Hindu population was pushed out. So we have an idea of what happens when force and, authoritarian forces come together and try to, use that to create a change on the ground, a change of demographics, if you want to say that. Yeah. So we see that, and we saw that happening here. And India by nature is a pacifist country. We're not a country which is used to aggression or territorial expansion. We totally do not believe in that. We believe in free will. We believe in people living peacefully. So what happened in Armenia here connected to the people back home. And this was the first war which was so televised in the sense of, we're seeing all these drone footages, and, that was the first time it really hit a lot of people back home. And the other reason, I think, it was also a very good timing in the sense of for the cooperation. The time that you went through the crisis, we were also going through a crisis back home. The Chinese, we had a territorial skirmish with them. We still are on a standoff with them. And that made us realize that we need to become self-dependent. We can't be relying on foreign suppliers for weapons for the safety and security of your country. And most importantly, you need more allies, like-minded people. We need to expand, people we have been friends with for centuries, but, it's somewhat lost in the way. But we're trying to reconnect with the world. We're trying to have like-minded nations together. And I think Armenia and India are a perfect fit. And as you know, India has no real presence in this part of the world, but it makes sense. You're at the crossroads of this region, so it makes complete sense to increase all-around ties, not just defense, but trade and people to people, and cultural. Of course, the ancient ways have to be revived again.
Well, we can see some very significant developments. I know that we've signed lots of agreements on trade. We're cooperating to trade to Iran now with the Chabahar port. Pharmaceuticals is a big area, and of course IT, right? We're seeing whereas our IT companies traditionally, or up until just a couple of years ago, were always looking towards the United States for growth and expansion. They're now starting to look east for talent and expansion and cooperation. It's very interesting to see these developments. And so let's talk a little bit about Armenia's weapons purchases and defense ties with India that seem to be only growing and accelerating in speed. Every month there's some rumor that Armenians are looking at some new defense systems and weaponry. So can you tell us a little bit about what India is bringing to the table that we couldn't previously acquire?
See, in the past, the globe had a few supply systems available. You had the American systems, a whole bunch of systems. You had the Chinese, who are the newest player. You had the Russian systems and the Israelis. Now, all four of them come with certain, problems or dependencies. Americans are very prone to using their arms sales to put political will onto you. The Russians, we know what's happening. They're struggling inside. Chinese is a different topic altogether. So we realized that we need to develop our own system. So India is now looking to be self-dependent. We've been the world's largest importer of arms for decades. And I think the government decided it's time to stop it. And we need to have an independent homegrown system in place where you can produce weapons. The kind of stuff that we are doing with Armenia right now, I would say for now it's very basic system. It is artillery guns, which are basic but very important. As we've seen in Ukraine, the whole battle is artillery. But it's not a very high-end, high-tech, Star Wars system, but it is still there. So we are doing artillery guns with Armenia now. We're doing multi-barrel rocket launchers. Again, these are indigenous. We were dependent on the Russians for many years, but now the technology is not very, very, very advanced level. So we have that available. So these are basically India's looking at providing to Armenia what a lot of other countries are not doing, which is lethal warfare capabilities. A lot of the equipment that the West gives to you comes with the conditions of use. And we in India, we believe that when we trust Armenia as a country, we trust it to use the weapons in the right way. And the values are similar between the two countries. So there is no fear in the minds that this will be misused. The only condition is don't use them against us. But we are too far away for that to happen. And I
also think the logistics of fighting a war of a country of 3 million against 1.4 billion. I'm no military strategist. I just don't think that's a very good idea.
Yeah, I don't think that's something we need to worry about. And so a lot of the basics of war have not changed. We've seen, we're very mesmerized with the drone videos and all these fancy little new things. But at the core of it, it's still the soldier. It is still a gun involved. There is still kinetic energy involved. And India has considerable experience of decades of making them. And it makes sense that now that we are opening up and, we want to be a provider of security to the region, we are not looking to start any arms war. That is not the intention at all. We've seen that how that plays out in our own country. It is bad for your economy, it's bad for everything. But minimum things required for a war, I think we are looking at that, and the kind of talks we are having is amazing. And more than that, I would like to tell you something more. The kind of the pace of delivery which has been made to Armenia is unprecedented. I mean, some people in our armed forces are jealous. They're like, hey, these guys are ordering stuff and it's coming to them in a matter of months or less than a year. They don't get it there. So there's a whole of government approach back home in India. The government is really pushing and playing for expedited deliveries to make sure things come to Armenia on time. So there is a concerted effort to make sure that whatever Armenia needs and whatever we can possibly give will be on the table and will be delivered.
So we do have some interesting, as we follow India's defense capabilities, we're noticing, as you mentioned, there's a very heavy focus on indigenous production, but you're seeing a lot of very traditional Russian frames, Russian technology that's being almost upgraded with a mix of French, Israeli, and other systems. I know that India signed some very huge deals actually with the US very recently for drones and so on. So it's interesting to see India's development. That being said, there have been a lot of rumors that have come out that the Russian side, especially when there's joint production, has been barring the sale of certain systems to Armenia. In other words, exerting pressure on India to prevent it. What can you say about that, and what are some of the alternatives that we can look at?
See, whenever you are dependent on somebody for a system that is in your country, it will come with conditions. So, that if Russia wants to stop things to Armenia, it is out of Indian hands to do anything about it. The alternative is that we have tried to replace all software on Russian hardware that we have with our own, or with, like you said, with Israeli help or French technology. And that's the way to go forward, because unfortunately what we've been seeing as a very practical thing on the battlefield is that Russian defense technology, after the 90s, there has been a huge gap, and we are finding it difficult to match our adversaries with the kind of technology they were offering. So we're trying to upgrade it to our specs. The hardware is still good, but the software which really gives it the edge was missing. See, the only way ahead is you got to not have a dependency on Russia. We don't want a dependency on Russia.
Believe me, neither do we.
Yeah, nobody should have
point,
that.
yeah.
So the way going forward is you have to develop your own systems, which is what we are doing. So the Pinaka rocket launchers, which have been delivered to Armenia as well.
Yeah.
These ones are replacements that we have made indigenously to replace the Smerch and the BM and the Grads, and we're going to increase their range and lethality as time goes by. Yeah. So you have to stop basically looking at single source or multi-source sourcing of equipment. So we have now diversified. We have, like you said, American things coming in. We have Israel, we have French. We find the French very dependable when it comes to supplies, especially during crunch time. They have been a good partner. And we are experienced in operating a mixed match of technologies. And I think that's the way that going ahead in the world, if you're not in the Chinese ecosystem, that is how the world is going to go into. Because you have to, no country can alone do anything. It has to be an alliance of countries, of technologies, and we're working on that. I'm sure looking at your force structure, which will emerge in the next 2-3 years, I think it's going to be quite similar. It's going to be a mix and match of legacy Soviet, latest Western, third country. So there are a lot of similarities between the two countries. Lots to learn in terms of training and maintenance and operation of these systems as well.
You mentioned the Pinaka systems, which are particularly interesting because the news of their delivery to Armenia, not purchase, but delivery, prompted an angry phone call from Aliyev to your foreign minister. And what's
Deshankar.
Yeah, what's really cool about these things is that they're designed to strike high altitude positions and then move as fast as physically possible, which, as you see, the Azeri tactics over the last 2 years has been to secure high altitude positions overlooking where they have fire control over Armenian positions, and then use drones. And we were able to now strike them and move before the drones can even be deployed. So they're particularly unhappy about that. So tell us a little bit more about what we know that Armenia has purchased from India, and why are these weapons suitable for Armenia's current needs?
So some of the other systems, as you know, they're artillery guns. They're not very high range, but they give you depth, so they can be a good complement to your Pinakas. Yeah. And we use these two systems in tandem back home. See, when it comes to mountain warfare, I think India has unprecedented experience. We have two open contested borders, one with Pakistan and with China, both at high altitude mountain. So our troops and equipment profile is very matched to operating in the mountains. So all of our systems are tested. So when an Indian system is certified by the Indian Armed Forces, it is tested at a height of 4,000 meters. And it is tested at 50 degrees plus, 50 degrees minus. So the survivability of the system when it comes to environmental harshness is very robust, because that is our requirements. So they do come with this reliability of being able to be operated in all kinds of weather conditions and altitude and temperatures. Secondly, we are now investing a lot more in mountain technology since 2020, the clash with the Chinese. And there's active effort right now to increase the range of the Pinaka. So the ones that you got are, the first gen Pinakas. The new ones that are being developed, their range will be doubled in the coming years, or it can even be tripled depending on how much the armed forces want to invest into it. So these are systems which can be expanded. So they're not static, that you have the range and stays the same. And there are innovations happening back home in explosives, in propellants, in detection technology. So India's, we're not a very rich country. So we try to make the most out of something that we have. So we will upgrade the same thing again and again. Unlike a lot of the Western philosophy in which they retire old systems and then replace something new, we try to extend the life of the same system, which makes sense for countries who are, cost conscious. And in terms of mountain warfare, a couple of things which might be of interest to Armenia in the coming months. We have just been testing our new battle tanks. We developed a new light tank. When we clashed with the Chinese in 2020, we realized that we need to have light armored vehicles up there. So we have just developed a tank. It's called the Zoravar. It's a 25-ton category tank. It's got new fire control systems, good accuracy, high mobility. Our artillery guns, the self-propelled ones, like the ones you talked about earlier, we have adapted them for mountain warfare, because when you go up high, the air becomes slightly thinner. It's more difficult for these things to the machines to move. So we have really adapted them through local engineering. So there are some things here that can be of use to Armenia.
What about in terms of training? I mean, like you mentioned, India is often overlooked as an army with battle experience. I mean, you fought 3 wars in the last 40, 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of training? First of all, do you know of any discussions of joint trainings or knowledge sharing between the Armenian armed forces and India's army, and what can India bring to the table that Armenia would need in its ongoing defense reforms?
Yeah, so there's definitely talk on. I believe it's already at very advanced levels, and I think we will soon see some joint training taking place. What India can bring to the table is, again, we've had 3 major wars or 4 major wars in the past 50 years, but for the past 30 odd years now, we've been at constant war on the border with Pakistan. There's a infiltration insurgency on there. They're using terror tactics, pushing in people, and all of that fight is taking place in the mountains. Kashmir is high mountain area, so our troops have a lot of battle experience when it comes to tactical, low level warfare. And the training that we have been doing for our troops, especially after the Chinese problem, those experiences can be useful. The kind of stuff that India can impart in terms of training is the physical fitness levels needed, what drills they do. We train with almost everyone in the world. Right now, biggest training partner is the US. We do the most amount of drills from them. So we are learning from the best in the world. The Japanese, the French, the Israelis. We have joint drills with almost everyone. So that experience gained can be also imparted to Armenian forces when the training starts. And not just that, the tactics of mountain warfare. So our units, when they are deployed in mountains, they are deployed, typically unit is deployed for 3 years. And the 3 years are basically all about training. So they might not see actual combat, but it is honed into them how to fight the war. So their area of responsibility, they know each and every spot, how to counter where the enemy can come from. So they see any battlefield with mountains, they can instantly translate that into what will happen, stage 1, 2, 3, 4 of war. So 3 years of deployment there is 3 years of training. And if Armenian troops can come there and, be embedded with these troops for some time, or even go through a longer training process, it can be pretty useful.
You mentioned joint trainings. I mean, famously, India and Greece had some Air Force trainings recently. I want to talk a little bit about what Armenia's perceived biggest vulnerability was during the 2020 Karabakh War and ongoing, right? It was no control over the air. We're not hearing a whole lot about air defense systems from India. We do know that we're looking or have purchased the Zen systems, counter drone and electronic warfare stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about what India is bringing to the table for Armenia?
See, of course, anti-drone warfare is the big thing now, and that is there. But you also have to cater for the bigger threats. So we have the Akash, which is the short-range SAM, surface-to-air missile system, but
and we
expensive.
did purchase those.
Yes, so that is there. I don't think in the Armenian landscape you need much longer range systems, because your war fighting is going to be very close to each other. The depth is very limited in that sense.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but one thing that we are particularly concerned about is first of all, the Akinci drones that the Turks have sent to the Azeris, and second of all, they've upgraded with these Turkish missiles. They've upgraded their Soviet airframes, essentially. Mm-hmm. But so what that means is that the Azeris can shoot from deep within their territory onto us. So we do need to be able to respond to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But in terms of pure air defense systems, I mean, of course, the offering from India is limited, because right now we have the Akash, we have anti-drone systems, but our longer range missiles for interception we have a joint production with the Israelis for that. So our medium range surface-to-air missiles are Israeli. What we have done back home also is We've repurposed a lot of the old Soviet-era air-to-air missiles, which were on our Sukhois and our MiGs, which you can fly them for a certain number of hours, and then they have to be taken off aircraft because of safety issues. We've repurposed them as air defense missile systems.
Wow.
So again, it's an example of jugaad. It's like an Indian word for jury rigging something, making something work, extending its life. So we're looking at those kind of solutions there. But the future of drone warfare, we are also working a lot on anti-drone systems, which are not just jamming, which is kinetic interception. I can't say much about this right now, but there's one particular system in development, which is jamming, which has a kinetic capability to take down the drones, and it has also a counter-drone swarm system. So these are innovations which will be useful in the coming, but this system will take a couple of more months to be matured, but I'm sure it will be on the Armenian radar when it's ready.
Well, I hope we get a nice Christmas present before it's too late. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Israeli technology, and there's been a recent article that Armenia is looking at some kind of joint-produced Indian-Israeli air defense system. First of all, is that doable? I mean, does Israel give permission, especially considering that they're one of the largest arms suppliers to Azerbaijan, our sworn enemy? Mm-hmm. Does India have any kind of reservations about sharing joint technology with us?
See, I don't think India would have reservations in sharing that technology. Of course, the Israeli question can only be answered by them. We'll have to see when it comes, how it goes there. But yeah, that system has Israeli components. It is dependent on them, on supplies. But, India is the master of diplomacy, so they might find a convenient way of getting things done. I wouldn't put it past our guys to get that done. But yes, it is a little bit dependent on the electronics part on Israeli technologies.
So let's talk a little bit about China, because it's a player that seems and feels very distant from here. However, one thing that's easily forgotten is that Baku is a major port on their middle corridor, their Belt and Road Initiative. It is a staunch, let's call it what it is. It's not an ally of Russia. It's the colonial power holding the leash on Russia at this point. And, the Chinese invested heavily in Georgia and the Anaklia port. What do you think their role is in here, and does that kind of contribute to India's interest in the region?
See, the Chinese have been trying to expand their arc of influence across the world. And it surprised us. It should not have surprised us. But at the peak of the COVID crisis, they decided to move troops on our border and intimidate us and take over some territories. So they are at a point of their in the perception in India is they are now at the time when they want to exert and become and be counted as a global power. So they're looking to extend influence, of course, across India and the South China Sea. We know what's happening, everyday clashes. And this region, because for them connectivity is key, and the Belt and Road Initiative has been their primary focus for a long time, because they want to counter the trading advantages that the Western world has. And it makes sense. Azerbaijan is dependent on Pakistani support. Pakistan for us and not for us, it's very obvious. They are a vassal state of the Chinese. 80% of their arms and equipment come from China. They're bailed out by the Chinese on the financial front. So it doesn't make me surprised at all to think the Chinese are moving in influence through Pakistan into Azerbaijan. And the other thing we see, there is a very clear, it's underlying, they're being very subtle about it, but we see a Turkey, Pakistan and China alliance emerging. And we've seen this in our region. We recently had elections down in Maldives, a little island state in the Indian Ocean. And they have a very anti-India government there right now. And there was a lot of accusations that China was interfering and trying to disrupt their political process. And then we realized that the first visit of the new president of the Maldives was to Turkey, and he's now bought Turkish drones. And it took us some time to figure this out, but Turkey and China were working in tandem. So Chinese wanted influence there because they want to expand their area of influence. They use the Turkish channel to go in. So there is a alliance of convenience there that we see happening. So I would not be surprised with China using this conflict to solidify its position here. And like you rightly said, Russia is down right now, and China is trying to fill that space up. And it makes sense for them to exert as much influence as possible here.
We think that these kinds of alliances, we're all excited when they get started, but are of course, you mentioned Russia. I mean, Russia, we felt the same about them for a long time until we quickly understood that they've turned on us. What's the likelihood of Azerbaijan being able to financially or in some different way convince India that they're the ones that should be receiving the fun stuff?
I mean, look at the current, we're talking purely about defense right now and military equipment. Look at their equipment profile and look at their attitude. Their training is Pakistani, a lot of it. Their equipment profile is increasingly Chinese. They have been getting stuff. There's talks of acquiring Pakistani aircraft, which are actually Chinese aircraft.
Yeah.
So
CJ-17 or something?
Yeah, they're not really great aircraft, but they are aircraft. They're numbers, right? But I don't think India has, any chance of getting into it, nor any desire, frankly, because it's better to deal with, countries which have similar value systems as yours. So especially when you're selling arms, you don't want to be selling arms to a regime which is seen as, which can be dangerous. And, we want to be responsible power with arms supplies, unlike the Chinese who will supply arms to any dictator or are willing to deal with the North Koreans. India wants to have a different approach. We are looking at responsible, like arming people who need it for defensive purposes. We don't want to supply arms to people who are looking to expand territory, because the core principle of India, we've said this so many times in the UN, is that territorial boundaries have to be respected. Human right values have to be respected. So I don't see Azerbaijan coming in, and disrupting Indian supplies to Armenia at all.
Tell us a little bit more about, because this is really a subject that's not that explored here, especially, right? The Azeri and Pakistani military cooperation. We know that Pakistan's been a supporter of Azerbaijan, but there's some rumors that they sent advisors or even some special forces during the 2020 Karabakh War. But the three big culprits that we're upset with are Turkey, Israel, and Russia. Pakistan kind of gets ignored, mostly because everybody here understands it's a failed state. Not that important. But in reality, I mean, that's something that's interesting. So what the Azeris are buying is actually Chinese components.
Yeah.
Right, and it's interesting to see Turkey, for example, where they're asking for Pakistani help on building their new Khan fighter. I'm assuming it's the same thing, right? What they're really asking for is Chinese help, because what are the Pakistanis going to contribute to the development of a supposed fifth generation aircraft? Tell us a little bit about this. What do you know? Yeah,
see, as you know, Pakistan is the only country that I know of which is not recognized Armenia as a country even now. So they are.
It's okay. Soon we won't recognize them either, but it's fine.
So they are, they have been on the other side of this war. So their relationship with Azerbaijan have been strong over the years, and in terms of, I'm not surprised with military advisors at all, because they have been outsourcing their military presence to the entire Islamic world. We've seen Pakistani trainers and, even pilots operating in the Middle East, in other areas of conflict. So they are, like in India, we are very circumspect about sending our soldiers abroad, even retired ones. We do it very carefully. But unfortunately, in the Pakistani system, it's business. And so I think they have been doing that training bit of it a lot. And like you rightly said, I think Pakistan is just a name. The real thing there is China. So it is a route to push in things into Azerbaijan without the Russians getting too rattled about it. Because, it's like Azerbaijan can always say, Pakistan, old friend, ally. We go back a long time. So I think it is a route which is being used there. And on Turkey and Pakistan, they're very close allies on the military front also. The Turkish are building frigates for the Pakistanis. They have a huge arms trade transaction.
Well, they're selling the Bayraktars as well, yes. Akinci drones as well.
Yeah. So it makes sense for all these three countries to be together. That's why when I said last time, it's Turkey, China, Pakistan. That is a new nexus building up in our region, which is a bit subtle. It's not been talked about much, but I think we're going to see them work together in a lot more. The question now is, what does Iran do to counter that? So Iran is really in a bit of a spot here, because it has Pakistan on one side and, a old rivalry with Turkish on the other. So this area is going to see more contest, and it's going to be something to watch out for.
What can we do to counter Chinese technology? I mean, is it something we should be worried about, or is it something that the Indian stuff that we're receiving from India is taken into consideration, factored in, and is essentially ready to neutralize?
Yes, see, the thing is that Chinese technology is now in a lot of things superior to Russian technology. We have been seeing that. So the countering to that has to be, an approach towards the West. Better technology is available in the West. So a lot of our thinking and our systems, what we are developing, are on the Western philosophy of design. And so India as a country has been trying to gain high tech from US, from France, a bit from the Israelis in the past, but now more shift is towards Europe. So yeah, to counter Russian or Chinese, you have to do better tech. And the better tech is available in the West, and I think that's where we are orienting ourselves at. And I see Armenia doing the same with France and Greece at a lesser extent.
Well, the Greece partnership is, at the same time, it's an old one, but it's also going to be starting to pick up steam very, very soon, right? So, Manu Pubby, thanks again for hopping on. This was an enlightening conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me on here, and I hope I made some sense.
No, it was perfect.
Okay, great.
Thanks again for watching. It's been Pat from Civilnet.